Well, hello there, folks. It's Roger from There Be Giants here to host another fantastic episode of Giant Talk. And I'm especially chuffed today because I've got somebody joining me who I feel a bit of a fanboy of, actually. I'm pleased to have with me today Jonathon Hensley, who is CEO of Emerge Interactive over in California. And is it your whereabouts? It's north of San Francisco, isn't it? You Portland?
So actually, I'm based in Portland, Oregon, which is just north of San Francisco, but I'm actually in San Francisco today. So,
well, yeah, excellent. So you're where a lot of this happens first. A lot of this is pioneered. So great to have you with us, Jonathon. As I said, you came up on my radar because you'd written a book called Alignment, which is something that's very central to the work that we do here, and is always a really important benefit that when clients, want to put OKRs in place, that they want to actually realize, they want to build, they want to strengthen the alignment in the organization. So I'm sure we'll take quite a deep dive into that in a minute. But just before we do, tell us a bit about what you've done, what's led you to where you are now, and a bit about your background.
I've been in product for over 2 decades now, and the origination of my journey into this space really came from early years of growing up in Silicon Valley. And I had a unique opportunity where I had my family. I have a mother who's a psychologist.
Right.
And so I grew up around trying to understand or discussions with my family about, how do people think? Why do they behave the way that they do? And this informed this incredible passion for continuous learning and trying to understand why we make and do the things that we do. And being in Silicon Valley, then immersed around technology, trying to look at, why do we use technology the way that we do? How can we use technology to essentially better our lives and change the way that we work? And this intersection of technology and human behavior has driven my passion for the last 20 plus years into understanding how can we create great products and build things that people love to use and really make a difference in the businesses that are building them. Right.
Fantastic. So you had a pretty great foundation with your mother and the psychologist sort of angle on things. I guess that kind of opened your eyes from an early age, kind of really starting to think about, like you say, what people say and what people do, why they do it, so on and so forth. So that obviously was the spark, it sounds like, for this.
It was immensely powerful and profound for me to have that experience. And I think, it was a time where I remember as even as a small kid, I would go into these computer meetup groups and get parts from people working at Hewlett Packard and people down in Cupertino building, Apple computers. And, this is, back in the 80s and 90s. And being able to take these things and start to take them apart, rebuild them, understand how they work. And, and I really started on the hardware and software engineering side of things. And then eventually, became enthralled with, how we actually build software, which then, how do we create organizations that can build great software? And that led me into this passion of understanding how do you build really effective organizations, and more importantly, how do you build teams that empower people to build these incredible things? And so that has been the absolute foundation that all of my work has been based on.
So I think we're starting to get a sense of your passion. But when somebody writes a book, it's usually because they're fired up about something. And so I'm curious, in your own words, what would you say, got you fired up?
So what really was the catalyst for all of that is, I'd been in technology for a long time, and I came across this statistic that, about 90% of products either fail or underperforming expectations.
Yeah.
And when I thought about the amount of energy and time that's going into developing these products and services, I was like, that's just a staggering rate of failure. And why does that failure happen? What is the underpinnings? What are the root causes for that kind of failure? And so I decided to start researching and interviewing folks all over the world about understanding failure. And ironically, through that process, what happened is I started to meet these individuals who hadn't just failed, but they'd also had incredible successes, and not just once, but again and again and again. And I wanted to understand, how are these individuals building teams that are beating these odds consistently? And there was clearly something very unique and extremely powerful taking place that was not very well understood. And when we talk about failure, the root cause was often pointed at is lack of market fit. And that's a very broad umbrella reason for a lot of smaller things that are happening behind the scenes that are actually leading to that lack of market fit. And so on the other side of that, those that were succeeding weren't just finding market fit, but they were, all those things that were happening behind the scenes were being addressed in a very different way. And what that resulted in is this very, very clear picture that all these leaders are doing one thing, equally to drive success. And that is they have a tremendous focus on alignment. And so after that realization, I set out to write a book and really peel back the layers and understanding what is alignment, how do we need to think about it as leaders, and how do we also need to think about it from the product team level, so we have a bridge to bring leadership in these teams together to more effectively solve problems and deliver better outcomes.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it's kind of curiosity and asking the question, well, some are getting it right, some are getting market fit right, and so what is it that they're doing that's different to those that are struggling? And I can relate to that, because I asked a similar question about a different aspect of organizational performance back in, it was about 2015, 2016. I didn't write a book, but I did write a paper off the back of it, and that led to a complete gear change for the business. But yeah, I mean, we're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk about you. But so just kind of to build on that, what would you say your mission is now? Now that you've written the book, you've obviously done a huge amount of research. Your thinking, I imagine, has moved on significantly in the field of alignment. So what mission are you on now then?
Today, really, my mission is to actually build better product leaders, and really help them understand how alignment is at the foundation and the heart of their success. And by their success, I really mean that their role in creating the environment necessary for a team to deliver great products and services.
Right.
And I think it's an opportunity not just to deliver better products, but to build better product cultures inside of organizations, so that they can really tap into the incredible talent that makes up their organizations. I mean, I've never met a CEO of a company that doesn't say their people are their greatest asset. Yeah. And so I think it's pretty important that we empower these people to do the things that they're capable of. And that requires us to build a culture that can do that. And I think it's not complicated, but it's also not easy work to be done. It's hard to build that type of culture. And so I think this is one of the most critical elements of our time, especially when there are so many constraints happening in the world for people, and there's so much opportunity for innovation. Alignment is one of the most essential tools that we can have in our kit in order to really move the needle and move our organizations forward.
Yeah, I guess, alignment is the outcome of really good leadership, and you could argue, I suppose, because it's one thing having good leadership, but then where's the evidence of that? All right, yes, the results one would hope are there, but there's there's something in between, isn't there? And thinking about it as well, you talk about product leaders, product managers being able to create the right environment in which their teams can absolutely be at their best. So for me, I think there's more than just those product managers need to be more than just experts at agile and experts at running creating roadmaps and so on and so forth. They have to have a degree of leadership. They have to have really good coordination skills. They have to be multi-talented. You talk about culture. They need to have a good sense of culture, how to build it. They also need to have a good handle on, and this may sound a bit strange saying this, but technology. And I mean technology in the sense that can enable their teams to do their jobs really well. So it's multifaceted now, isn't it? They have to be experts in so many different areas to be able to create this right environment.
It's an incredible task that we ask of product managers, in my opinion. And it's why when you see a fantastic product manager, they stand out so much because of that. We ask so much of them, and somebody who has those capabilities, those competency as a product manager, as a product leader, it's incredible. I mean, some of these areas, like you talk about, like being able to understand Agile and Scrum, or being able to understand, developing roadmap, those are important things. But some of the biggest challenges that we place on product managers and their teams is you have to communicate up through the organization, down through the organization, and cross-functionally all at the same time. You have to work in an environment where you're asked to be, in some cases, the famous line around, product managers are the CEO of the product. So you have all of the responsibility, as Dan Olson likes to say, but not necessarily any of the power. A lot of times you don't control the resources and the some of the financial aspects of your product potentially, so you have this incredibly intricate, complex piece, and you have to have enough knowledge to not just be a great product manager, but to understand how to enable great designers, how to empower and enable great engineers, how to support and collaborate with marketing for each release and major launch and pushing that product out to your target audience. You have to become an expert in analyzing how, the focus in your product and the outcomes you can drive with a product create the business outcomes that people are looking for. And as a result, you're helping customers do things that otherwise they could never do before, or are doing better than any way that they've done before. And so we ask all of these intricate pieces that is really, equates in my mind almost like we're asking product managers to be the conductor of a symphony. Yeah. And we're asking them to coordinate all of these aspects, and we're asking them to do it every day while holding on to the big picture, but not losing a single detail.
Yeah.
And so how could anything, less than perfect alignment make that job possible? And so really at the end of the day, this issue is so pervasive, and it's so intricately complex based on the size of the organization, that this quality of alignment is really necessary to be understood, not just at the team level and for product managers that we're trying to set up for success, but leaders today have to understand what their responsibilities are into establishing alignment and in making sure that the things that they are responsible for, like the strategic vision of the company and the direction, is completed and articulated at the level that actually enables their teams. And so all these pieces, become so interconnected so quickly, and are really essential when we talk about, how does an organization maintain its focus and really achieve the things it's set out to do.
I love some of the ways that you framed it there, conductor, absolutely. CEO without the power, arguably that's an even more challenging task to corral and manage resource when you don't ultimately have control of it. That whole thing about you may well be there may well be some friction with line managers who actually own the resource which you need to come in and work on your product. So I've worked with clients where there have been lots of friction and conflicts around that sort of thing. But okay, so you've written the book, you spent a long time researching it. Just give us a run through on the headlines that you discovered when around what you discovered about alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think one thing about alignment is really helpful is to understand unpacking the idea of alignment. Like what does that actually mean when we think about alignment? And so alignment, it has really 4 dimensions to it. So the first one is individual alignment, which is really focused on understanding how your work matters, the contribution you make, why you're doing what you're doing, and how critical your role is into making an impact. And so that's a really important one. And it's really critical when you think about how do I know the importance of my work? How do I feel supported and empowered? It helps me understand why the organization is maybe setting things up in a specific way, because now I have context.
Yes.
Not just for myself, but where I fit inside of the team, inside of the bigger organization. And that is an incredibly important aspect for so many reasons, which is a whole deep conversation in itself.
Yeah.
The second one, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that when we're looking at it from an individual perspective, the sense of connection and sense of purpose are just absolutely essential, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the most interesting things, especially in the software industry and industries across, broadly speaking as well, is that, we've shifted a long time ago from this old industrial model of where we command and control, just focus on this one piece. You're going to put 4 screws here and place this bumper on the car. And that's the only thing you do. And you're going to do that 1,000 times a day. And we don't hire people for those types of work anymore. We create automation. We do other things to enable that. What we really look for is people to bring more of their individuality, more of their problem solving skills, more of their ability to contribute. So if you're working, on a product, you're expected to be helping solve problems, to continuously bettering not just the product itself, but the way that you deliver that product. Your input and your insight is invaluable. And same goes for just about any industry. There's always this feedback mechanism where if you're in a culture that, believes in continuous growth and improvement, then that feedback mechanism and that awareness is absolutely essential. So individual alignment becomes one of the most critical things leaders can do, is to making sure that individual for every role that exists within an organization to essentially deliver on the mission or the purpose of that company, understands how it's connected.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what you talked about the 4 different aspects of alignment. What more did you find around alignment as you kind of unpicked it?
Yeah. So the second big one was the idea of team alignment, which really deals with how do we build alignment with others and integrate our unique disciplines and experiences and perspectives to solve a shared problem. So the idea of, basically when we focus on this idea of we want to promote collaboration, we want to bring people together, we want to, achieve, this specific objective, and attain these key results as we go, right? how do we actually make sure that we're all understanding that? And sometimes these are, long-term dedicated teams, or maybe this is a team that's been brought together cross-functionally specific to address this thing.
Yeah.
And so how we build alignment establishes the foundation for that team's success, long-term or short-term, regardless of its composition.
Yeah, we see that a lot with OKR teams, where they're formed as a cross-functional team or squad or whatever you would want to call them, to help drive forward whatever it is that's in support of that particular priority. Yeah.
Very, very key with OKRs from our experience too.
Yeah. So that's individual and team. The third is...
So the next one is organizational alignment, which really deals with how does the organization align its strategic priorities and resources with the vision for the company. So, we're always dealing with a, scenario of every organization has so much opportunity. And there's also a counterpoint to that, which is we also have a constrained set of resources that we have to work with. So how do we align those resources and those opportunities to enable the best possible outcome? And so that's how we provide the, either the tools or the services or the actual team members themselves to make up these teams in our organization. And so making sure that we have alignment to those things, and that we're also ensuring that we're supporting these initiatives correctly, is that third level of alignment within an organization that's extremely critical. And sometimes it's really looked through a fine-tooth comb of more financial management and practice than it is about enabling. And so we have to make sure we're looking at all aspects of how, those resources are really managed.
I guess that can range from anything from organizational design through to structuring of budgets, and everything in between.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I sit on the board of several companies, and, cost and efficiency is a very big topic right now. And so, we do have to look at, these resources, extremely closely, and it's important. And you have a responsibility to manage these things carefully and thoughtfully. And so the idea, though, that are you looking at just the balance sheet, or are you really looking at the sum of what you're trying to achieve in the context of where resources are needed? Are you understanding when you're building a product that you're making a long-term investment? Do you have a clear understanding of how that investment is going to produce, a result in moving you forward to your intention for the organization? And so I think resource management and making sure that's aligned to the intentions and the goals for the company are really critical. And it also needs to be taken into serious consideration when you think about prioritization and how many things you're asking of your organization.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So that's three. I think you said there was four. So go on. The fourth is?
Absolutely. So the fourth one is actually market alignment, which this deals with understanding your customers and your users' needs and the problem that you're solving for them, the impact of that problem, and the hurdles you face. So you might also refer to this as market fit. But I think market alignment goes a little bit deeper than just market fit of a problem. It's really looking at where is in addition, the reoccurring value that you can create and how that will actually change the lives of your customers.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. That really unpacks alignment, I think, for certainly for me, and I'm sure it does for our listeners. I think most people, when they talk about alignment, just think about, we've got to get everybody understanding what the priorities are so we can all be pointing in the same direction. And yes, that's part of it, but there's more to it. And I think sort of chunking it down into those four different constituent parts or types of alignment, whichever way you want to frame it, I think is helpful, really helpful. So, okay, let's move on. You've shared what you've discovered about alignment. Now, you, through your research and also through your experience, I'm sure you have come across a number of common mistakes or pitfalls or missed tricks that organizations have either made or fallen into when it comes to building alignment. So, what are the things that, if our listeners are looking to really build alignment, they should be looking out for? What are the warning signs, perhaps, that they're not quite getting it right, and the things to avoid?
Yeah, so there's several, and I think there's a couple of those that I'd really like to highlight. And partly of this is because, as you and I were talking before we started the show today, I was at a conference yesterday. I was at another one the week before. And some of these have just been pervasive themes, listening to all of these hundreds of people in product talk in just the last few days. And so I think it brings a really incredible emphasis to some of these key things. So one of the biggest challenges is, I'm going to just put it out there before you can kind of get to the mistakes, is if ego is driving your organization, you need to have a really, really thoughtful, hard look at yourself and how that's impacting your abilities. Because I think what we see is when ego is driving decision-making and getting in the way of actually understanding or connecting with customers and your audience's needs, then it's really important that sorry, somebody just tried to come in.
We should just say to everyone that Jonathon joins us from his hotel room in San Francisco at the moment.
So my apologies to everybody listening. The housekeeper just tried to come right through the door.
Happens to the best of us.
So this emphasis, though, of the ego really does have to be checked, because it creates bias. It removes us a level from being closer to understanding the problem and the impact of the problem we're trying to solve. And so I think, first and foremost, we have to look at that. And this is not to say this is easy. This is a perfect example of why it's so hard. And ego does not have to mean, sometimes it's associated to, I've got the executive or the highest paid person in the room, and they've got this, big ego, and they're coming in and they're saying it has to be this. It doesn't have to be that person. It can be anybody. And it's really important that we just resolve that we're all people. We all have an opinion, but for now we're going to set that aside, and we're going to try to find the truth of the matter here and how our customers see it. And so that leads to the next one is, a piece, which is, understanding your customer. And I think that one of the things that happens often is we look at customers through the lens of, personas or ideal customer profile or some sort of, structure that we've created.
Yeah.
And we look at a lot of data, and that data really is focused on things like, what do customers do? But what it doesn't tell us is why customers do the things that they do. And we need to focus on understanding the why, the drivers behind their behavior and the need for our products and services. And so when organizations become very much build first, ask, second, they tend to run into massive problems with this disconnect of how value is actually created for the end customer. And sometimes that customers can be internal. So this happens just as frequently with internal customers, and not having them involved in building these products that are going to enable the organization to be successful and thrive. And so this is another common pitfall where there's tremendous misalignment taking place.
Yeah, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And it's in my experience, it's where the needs of that customer are just either lost sight of or not even fully understood. And somebody gets, carried away with, we can build this, let's do it. It'll be, it'll be really interesting. It'll be funny. It'll be exciting. And then, like you say, it doesn't actually perform or doesn't actually build any value for the customer. Okay, so you talked there about a couple of things that can get in the way, and I'm ego, yes, massively. Arguably, you can see that play out in certain political events that are taking place at this moment in time, which is probably the clearest example. But ego gets in the way of learning, doesn't it? You can't possibly look back objectively and learn from previous experience and then play that forward into the next iteration if ego forces you to believe or has you believing that I'm perfect and I've got it right and it's everybody else that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean it taps into another issue of people just they're so invested into what they're creating and building that they tend to fall in love with that idea or that solution.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things is, we have to flip that around. We have to fall in love with the problem we're solving, because that problem we're never done solving it. Yeah. Once we deliver a product, it's just that iteration of the solution. We're constantly looking to improve on that. By staying true to falling in love with the problem and understanding it, become that subject matter expert on that problem. Yeah. We stay more grounded and we can have a more honest perspective on how that product needs to evolve and be driven. And that is also an invaluable asset when you think about some of the other common mistakes. I mean, and these are not made intentionally, which is so interesting to me in doing all of this research, is a lot of these foundational root cause issues are not by intention. They're by a natural evolution of many organizations. And so I'll give a very poignant example to this is siloed knowledge. As your organization is growing, you have experts in all of these different areas, and eventually that knowledge gets institutionalized within these different teams or these groups or individuals, or maybe you just have one person that is that subject matter expert.
Yeah,
and you don't have you lose the line of sight of who owns that information. How do you distribute and democratize that information across your organization? How do you actually make that accessible to people? And so this challenge is something that every organization faces. It's it's not technology is a great piece for helping it, but it actually comes back to more of a culture issue. Is do I hold information? Do I really share information? Do I look for opportunities to contribute to see if it's, contextually relevant? How do I actually promote the environment for knowledge transfer and sharing? And this is something that, I think there's so many little tricks and tips you can build into your organization to address some of these kind of foundational issues that start to develop.
Yeah.
So you can bring cross-functional, awareness into the product org. And another one that I think is really important also to highlight here is the gap of shared knowledge. So when we talk about siloed knowledge is one thing, but the other side of that is, do you have a shared understanding of the common knowledge in the organization? And I think this is also a tremendous issue for many, is when we talk about, for example, customer. Well, the customer might be different depending on who you're talking to in the organization.
Yeah.
So I was working with a client not long ago where they, the product team had one idea of who the customer was. The finance department, they thought the customer was the person who paid the bill. But that's not who the product team thought as the customer, because for them, the customer is the person that uses the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, the customer success team was working with another group of stakeholders that they thought was their customer, which weren't the end user and also weren't the person paying the bill, because they were providing a B2B product. And so there was multiple team facets taking place, and which was only complicated by their fact of how they approach distribution of their product as well. So now they have they have third-party partners that are also part of the equation.
Yeah.
So for another part of the organization, that's their customer. And so this challenge can get, is just, when you start to peel the layers back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. That's confusing. Yet we're using the same language for very different audiences that have very different needs that need to be cared for in very different ways. And so these things, again, they don't happen by intention, but they happen all the time.
Yeah.
And you find a lot of leaders, in my experience, great leaders are spending a tremendous amount of their effort in clarifying roles, responsibilities, and basically becoming that truth sayer that can say, no, when we're talking about this, this is what we mean.
Yeah.
Versus putting that collective power together to enable the organization. So, this is just a snapshot of a few of these challenges. There's many more in the book, as you know, but I think that, these are some common things that just about every business in every industry has to struggle with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reminded of another piece of work, which I think sits very nicely sort of in complementary to yours, which is the work of Amy Edmondson, which she did around psychological safety in organizations. And you talk about, people being willing to share, being feeling safe enough to actually speak up and voice concerns and so on and so forth. And, coming back to ego for a second, if the ego is present, then that just neutralizes it straight away and everybody shuts up. And you've got examples of brain trust groups and things like that, where, you put all the bias and the ego aside, leave that at the door, and you do a full look at whatever it is that's being examined and picked apart, but without the accusation, the blame, without the emotion in it. It's looked at objectively, and that's not something which, if it's not being commonplace, that's not something that can suddenly be switched on, is it? It's something that takes time to work towards, I think. I think it's great to aim for it, but I don't think you can kind of expect people to turn up on Monday and just they can suddenly feel safe, if you will. I think there's work that needs to be done there.
Roger, I think you're hitting on something that's so important and for everyone listening is actually profound in what we're talking about. I think, Google did a project that called Project Aristotle, which was this idea of how to research identifying, like, how do you create the best and highest performing team? And one of the critical aspects, I think it was the number one team dimension, was that of safety.
Yeah.
And
I know the work.
It's a great body of work on understanding the team psychology and understanding, how we enable teams to create and solve problems and innovate. And but safety is the foundation there. And to your point about culture, it's not a switch. Is that trust is something that's earned over time. It's a muscle that has to be developed in the organization. And so there is no way to switch on. It's like, now we're going to be a trusted, team organization. Prove it to me. Show me as, an individual that my management and leadership listens. Show me that when you listen, that you take action. Show me that if you don't take action, that you communicate why we didn't take action on that thing. Was it because you didn't value the opinion? Because we don't have the resources to do it? Because that we know in order to move our goals forward, we have to stay focused on this thing for now? Is it going to be taken into consideration down the road? There's a whole feedback mechanism that has to exist within an organization for people to have that psychological safety, at all times. And so there's a muscle that companies need to build there. Alignment is one of those incredibly powerful tools to build that trust. The practice of working to build alignment is is a huge component to establishing an environment where there is trust. And so that's, one of the things that we found is that leaders, and not just from my experience, but also, in the research that we did, is that the best performing leaders are ones that they do two things exceptionally well every time. They're always focused on building alignment, and they are incredibly, and they're present. They don't multitask when they're focused on you. They let you know that you are the priority in that moment. So even if it's only a 5-minute thing, they're not also texting or messaging somebody else at the same time. They're hearing you. There's an acknowledgement and there's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
And because there's a feedback loop, they're doing something, whether it's in a meeting or walking through the hall, there's a process of verification taking place. It can be sometimes as simple as them saying something, you responding, and then either, basically verifying, well, this is what I heard.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you build that practice, that muscle, it starts to make people feel recognized. It creates a better environment of inclusivity. It helps people, retain information better. Also, just from a psychological, component. And it helps people understand, yes, you've been heard. Now you've got a feedback. Now we're reinforcing that we have a shared understanding of that thing. And it has a tremendous ripple effect. I mean, it reduces meetings, it reduces rework, it reduces confusion, and all of these things that can take place by something as simple as that mechanism. Now, it sounds simple. Again, it's one of those hard things to do. It's a muscle, it's a skill you have to develop that enables that environment that can lead to trust and safety.
I think you may just have hit upon the one key takeaway that I'll come to at the end, but let's just park that for a second. So I'm curious about how alignment can help to enable, underpin innovation. I've got my theories, but I'm here talking to you, and you know alignment better than I do. So, what would you say around how alignment can help to enable innovation?
Well, I think let's talk about a common scenario. I think this it's something that everybody can relate to. Is a lot of times when a company wants to innovate, what are they looking for? Are they going to innovate process? Or are they going to redefine an experience? Like where do you start? And I think that one of the most important things that is often missing is a really clear vision of the destination. What are we working to achieve? And, this goes back to like, what's either the vision for the company or the product vision? And if you are a big enough organization where you have both, or you have a portfolio of products, then these things should be linked to, intimately. And the connection should be it needs to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
The challenge is like, what's the anatomy of a great, product vision, and what role does it play to enable this innovation? And so, having a vision that says, we need to, we're going to be a $10 million, annual revenue generating product. That doesn't do anything for anybody. No. That's a lagging indicator. It doesn't help me understand. It's a vanity metric, in all honesty. It doesn't really help build any alignment either. It doesn't help anyone understand the purpose of their work, the intended resources that need to go behind that. It just misses the mark. And when you look at your vision from the context of how it's also often taught, is it needs to be inspirational. It does, but that's only one facet of it. An inspirational goal, like being the best, product in your category, well, best by what measure? Best for the customer, best because you have the most awards, because you have the highest reviews. Like, define this ambiguity of best. And so leadership has a responsibility when building this culture of safety and promoting innovation, is to bringing clarity to that. And I think one of the things that I love from leaders that they all seem to find later in their career, this is kind of a career trajectory piece, is that they don't have to have the answer to that. It's okay to come to that process as a team and say, we need to figure out what that is. And so the anatomy of a great product vision then becomes a clear articulation of what you're working for. And it needs to be inspiring. It needs to be measurable, and it needs to articulate that destination. And so many companies will call that their North Star, or what are that strategic, that milestone in their organization. And that, is usually about a 3 to 5 year objective. It's a long-term perspective. And that becomes this incredible piece, because then what can you do when you enable innovation? You can say, okay, this is our goal. And if we focus from, which my personal favorite approach is to do, not that there's only one right way to do it, because there's not, but is this metric driven by our customer? So what's the benefit to the customer, the leading indicator that will enable that goal of $10 million in annual revenue that we can focus on? What kind of impact do we want to make in people's lives? And the value in that understanding and that clarity is, now we know where we want to be, and we know the impact on the people that we're trying to serve. And now what we have is we have alignment on why our work matters, because now we understand the impact of our work on those people and how we're going to improve their lives. We understand what that looks like when we get there successfully. And then what we can do is we can start working backwards. We can start breaking this big thing down into digestible chunks, year for year, quarter for quarter, month for month. And we can say, how do we innovate? What kinds of things can we do? And innovation takes two considerations. It goes back to the organizational alignment. What do we know better than anybody else? What are our core competencies and skills? And what resources do we have to do it? And so it doesn't mean you have to have a lot of resources to innovate. Maybe your, scrappiness is going to, a new perspective is going to drive some major innovation that's going to be completely disruptive to the rest of your competitive market. Absolutely fantastic, and it's why so often small companies come in and disrupt big companies all the time. I mean, it's the very nature of it, but it's because they had line of sight on something specific. It's not just speed, right? And so this facet of alignment, I think that illustrates a pretty strong example of where the vision that is created around that, how when you start to work backwards, it enables the organization, the team level, and the individual level to bring that focus necessary. And candidly, when we talk about OKRs, it's one of my favorite ways to reverse engineer how we bring that critical focus through the organization.
Yeah, that's the chunking down. It's the chunking down. I just as you were talking then, I got this visualization of a graph where on the y-axis you have difficulty, or rather the amount of effort that is required to achieve alignment, and on the x-axis you've got size of organization. I'm just seeing this. So, it kind of starts off fairly shallow, and then it just rockets up, because, as you said, small organizations, small businesses often come in because they have that direct line of sight, and that's easy to do. Well, not it's not a piece of cake, but it's easier to do when you've got a smaller organization. But the large corporates it's a huge challenge, isn't it? It's a huge challenge to build alignment through a large corporate.
Yeah, and it's why some of the biggest companies in the world create incubators and other programs where they can basically remove the necessity of aligning with the larger business and all of the cross-functional dependencies, and say, we're going to create an autonomous unit in our business who can take these opportunities with our resources of this larger organization, but we're going to remove the constraints of the organizational body to try to enable and accelerate this innovation. And so, that's another, that's something that, large organizations have been, modeling and playing with for, a very long time. And it's also why, you see a lot of organizations, it's better sometimes for them to take the approach of to merge or acquire a small business and to drive that innovation or to fund that business, but not bring them into the organization. They're actually extremely thoughtful investments to protect the autonomy and the culture of that organization. It's there are times where if you try to take the culture and the process of a big organization to this smaller organization, it would cripple its innovation. It's too fragile. And so you want to protect those people. You want to protect that safe environment and that ability to iterate quickly. But now they can do it capitalized or, with access to maybe new tools or insights that was never possible before. And I think this is a really good example is actually in AI right now, is that you don't have to be capitalized to leverage AI. I mean, it's this incredibly easily accessible technology. You just have to have a good use case for it where it actually creates value. And that's the great thing about how some of these technologies evolve, is they become enabling components for innovation. And so I think, right now it's all the buzz for many different and important reasons. But I think the true innovation that's going to be coming is actually we haven't even seen it yet. I mean, the real impact is coming quick, but it's far beyond the generative AI that is being focused on right now, and it's incredibly exciting to see what kind of innovations and thoughtful decisions are made by these small and large companies as they explore what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get off my soapbox about large corporates in a second, but I think it's a shame that they generally don't do a great job at building alignment through their organization, or if they do, they just try and force it. Because I'd argue that there is an inbuilt need within us all to feel a sense of alignment. It goes towards instilling a sense of meaning and purpose, which is really important for a lot of people. And in particular for the younger generations coming into the workplace now, all the data tells us that, in terms of them feeling like they're having an impact is on a par, if not more important than their remuneration. So, I think it's, and also I remember back to my days when I was working in corporate, and I made it a huge part of my role to ensure that every single person that was working for me understood the value of their contribution and what they were doing, and the impact that would have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 connections down the value chain. So I think I absolutely buy into alignment in so many different ways, and I think it's just a shame that corporates seem to have this inertia that really kind of causes a drag on getting really effective alignments in place.
Well, it's the bigger the organization, the challenge just exponentially gets.
Yeah, exactly.
It gets harder, and so it's I think it's true. There's more misalignment in larger companies than anywhere else. There's also a need for more process and structure than anywhere else, and so it's a real challenge. And unfortunately, if I could wave a magic wand, I would have alignment be taught in every business school program in the world. And ironically, you talk about kind of the individual, the human need, especially for the younger workforce. I mean, you're tapping into something that is also backed by countless, other sources of research far beyond, my own, in that, people do want to understand how their work matters. They want to understand. It's an incredibly key piece of alignment when you think about acquiring great talent and their desire to stay with you, to stick it out, to solve the hard problems, and to see the results of their work versus just hopping to the next, job or opportunity. And it's actually fascinating because I met an incredible neuroscientist while at the London Business School several years ago. He shared with me, from his own research and efforts, really, he wrote a book called Alive at Work. It's a fantastic book.
Mm-hmm.
And, how there's actually not just a psychological, but a biological component in how our brain chemistry works that seeks alignment.
Yeah.
We seek organization, we seek meaning, we seek structure. And he really broke down for me that alignment is truly far beyond psychological, but there's biological component in our makeup as human beings that seeks this out, cause and effect, and so it's important to understand that by building alignment, we're actually enabling the most basic root elements of ourselves in a modern world.
Absolutely.
We really have to focus on that. And organizational leaders can be so empowered if they understand what they're really tapping into with this principle.
It goes well beyond, feeling like you're a member of a team. It goes directly into, I understand my place, my role, my part, my contribution, my relationships, and that sense of belonging has been hardwired into us since, primeval days. So yeah, I completely get that. I've been a big fan of David Rock and his work through the Neuro Leadership Institute for many years. So yeah, I get the biological angle on this. But just before we move on to my final question about the one key takeaway, what you were just saying there just triggered something for me. We do for some clients, we do measurement of their culture, which may sound a bit strange because culture's, quite nebulous and difficult to pin down, but everybody feels it though. And we use this set of tools. They're not ours. They belong to an organization called the Barrett Value Center, but they have a really, really interesting headline measure that comes out of their the analysis that their tools do. And they call it cultural entropy. And it's it basically, it's the amount of wasted energy that's present within the organization. Okay. So they do this by looking at the presence of certain values, certain potentially limiting values, things like bureaucracy, excessive cost control, those sorts of things. Not always bad. There is sometimes a need, but if it's too much of anything is obviously is often a bad thing. But with these, the threshold for too much is actually quite low. You want to see very little of it. So, I was just kind of reflecting on what you were saying a moment ago about things that can get in the way. And we talked earlier about shaping how, it's a huge part of the project manager's role to help shape culture in their area of responsibility. But yeah, so there's kind of this, like I said, this principle of cultural entropy. And I think that's something which, if it's high, I'd put money on alignment being low, quite simply. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. When I meet people and discussing alignment, and they're sharing their stories with me, and that's one of my favorite things about traveling is getting to hear people's stories and just learning about their own experiences. It's one particular gentleman shared with me about how his leadership actually came into a meeting and said, "Forget alignment. We don't need to be talking to each other. We just need to get stuff done." And it's the irony of that. The idea of you can have not have alignment and just get stuff done faster is ironic. And so I reached out to this gentleman a few months later. I said, "How's that going?" And he said, "We are slogging through the muck trying to get unstuck as an organization, and it's never been more contentious. Our culture is one of you're only valued if you're getting deliverables out the door, whether they have any value or not.
Oh God!
And it's like, okay, well, what's next for you? And he's like, I'm looking, and for his next opportunity. It's unfortunate, and these things happen all the time, and not realizing, that kind of authoritarian leadership of coming in and like, we don't need to do this. We need to do it this way. It's like, again, what drives that? And these issues of, is it ego? Well, behind ego could be fear, a feeling of imposter syndrome, all these things that come up, and so this is human nature. And I think that, when we think about alignment, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the best of us and making sure it's connecting in our organizations. Yeah. And it's not, again, I've said this multiple times that, it's hard work. And so that hard work though has just such an incredible payoff. And I have never seen an aligned organization that doesn't make me want to jump in and get to work with them faster though. I mean, it is one of the most enthralling things to even just observing a team, who is in motion. I mean, it is watching that symphony play at their best. It's absolutely the timing, the communication, the symmetry. If they're struggling together, and that the solution they come up with is going to be brilliant. Yeah, it's so wonderful to watch. And I have to say, with even my own organization, when I see our teams in that, that moment, that's when I know that I'm doing something right. I mean, that is the measure of success for me is leadership, is, the level of that alignment in the organization. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing when it's working really well. Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, we've taken the lid off alignment, and I think we've dived in pretty deep on this. So I'm just going to come in with my last question, and that is, for our listeners, what would you offer as your one takeaway around alignment?
I think that just one, huh? Well, I think I would like everybody to take away that it's all of our responsibility to build alignment, and we can focus on building alignment at no matter where we sit in the organization around us with our own behavior and intention. And if that's the one thing that you're able to do, if your organization is struggling with this, lead by example. Leaders are not based on titles. They're not based on where you sit in the org chart. They're based on how you present yourself and people that are willing to engage with you and follow. And so, start those conversations, reconciling, do we have a shared understanding of these things? Build a common language and understanding, and strengthen those muscles of empathy and understanding so you can connect and challenge the things that are missing, that are holding you back. If the organization doesn't have a clear product vision, work with the organization to do that. Come to your leaders and, say, hey, this is something that I think we need to bring definition to make sure we can make better decisions, that we can work more effectively together. You can be that champion, and start small, start where you can. And if you can do that, I think you'll find that you have an incredible opportunity in front of you.
Well, I loved your little tip that you gave a little earlier on, if you're in that conversation, reflect back what you feel you've heard, because it demonstrates that people, you are listening and people feel heard. And it just, like you say, there's a ripple. I think you said the words you used were there's a ripple effect, and that's absolutely true. It's something which I was taught 15, 20 years ago, and it was a big it was a very small change that made a very, very big difference. It's one of those little golden nuggets that actually gave you a really good payback. So
Yeah, it's one of my favorite little things. And you're right, spot on. It's just it's to make people feel heard and acknowledged is, and the value you get from those conversations and where they can take you is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So, Jonathon, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us all the way from San Francisco. And I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who has tuned in to this episode of Giant Talk. You shall be able to tune in to the next episode in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled on your podcast platform of choice, and we shall pop up in your list very soon. Take care now.